Hello everybody, welcome to the Stock Books. Again, hey So in today's episode we are talking about Stephen King's The Talisman. Now, yeah, my camera's flipped, so this is going to prove tricky for me. As you can see, our pros and cons is short this week. Now, little update. Pros and cons list is actually difficult than I realised. Writing the pros and cons while reading, sometimes I have enough time to stop and write pros and cons. Sometimes I have more time to stop and write notes. So for future reference, sometimes the pros and cons may be shorter, they may be longer. So let's jump in. Cons. A little time I was lost. This is common in some Stephen King books where there is just so much detail, so much world that you can get lost, but at the same time it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you get lost and at the end it'll all piece together, which ties in perfectly with Jigsaw's story as a pro. And these two actually work together. So I was lost in some aspects, but when you got to the end and everything just fitted nicely, you suddenly took a step back and realized, oh, now I understand a little bit more. Is it worth understanding from a reader that it's going to happen? No, sometimes I would not pick up a book if I'm scared I'm going to get lost. But from reading Stephen King's Salem's Lot, Pet Cemetery, and It, and The Stand, I've grown used to how his writing style works, and I think it's a good pro at times. It keeps you on your toes and guessing. The Alice in Wonderland vibe is a weird one. I put that in there because the way Peter Straub and King describe the territories, which is the parallel dimension, is very much like stepping into Alice in Wonderland the first time. They always describe the sights and the smells, and they always describe the world in a pretty impressive and immersive great world building, as I've always mentioned in the pro. So there is a very much like every time it goes to that part of the dimension, like Alice in Wonderland for the first time, what she sees, what she feels, and her journey. And I can't fault that. I think it's actually fantastic, and I like it. Really well done. Story did flow nicely. I think I was hooked. It took me a little longer to read because I delete the time in chapter on my Kindle because it's distracted. So I didn't realize that this book was 900 pages long. King's work is lengthy, and in length, you get such a phenomenal world. You can't complain. You can if you don't have a lot of time to read. So it's very down to the personal opinion. For me, The Stand Uncut was a lot to get through, even though I will never review it because some content I didn't like. I find the length tolerable and good. Stephen King's It, I didn't want the book to end. It was horrifying, but also gripping, and it was weird. I mean, if it was any shorter, I don't think the book would have had as much impact, but I do think that sometimes there's some parts that could have cut out. So what else about this book stands out? Well, hopelessness. When you send somebody on a tale, you want hope. Lord of the Rings had Samwise Gamgee, The Fellowship of the Ring, Pippin. There's hope there. Alice had all her friends in Wonderland. Hope. In this book, there's no hope half the time. That could just be my understanding, but every time there was... It's like Game of Thrones-esque. Every time something is going right, it goes wrong. And with Jack's journey, it felt like when stuff was going right, it went wrong. Until the end, where you expected it to go wrong, but it went right, and the book ended, and that was perfect. There was no need to do exaggeration or make it bigger. It ended perfectly. But the way the journey of Jack from where he started to where he ended was fraught with danger. So putting in a very hopeful spin on it and making it upbeat and light-hearted would have knocked down that sense of risk, danger, and immersion. Having hopelessness and guessing if Jack's going to make it always kept me hooked and was a great story. I don't know what the word is. I'm gonna say story hook to keep it going. Um, but I think what I'm gonna promote the most in the story and what I say you should read it for is the way they do supernatural horror is great, and fantasy horror is really good. It's creepy, it's on the edge, the werewolf stuff is really well done, the horrors in the territory is perfectly done. But what tops it is the human horror. the human dread, the human fear, and pure primal desire of being humans being douches. When you read Stephen King's It, you do get a sense that It the clown is narcissistic and a dick, pardon French. And that is a very human trait to give something narcissistic and a dick. The vampires in Salem's Lot are very human-esque as well, the way they act and the way they group together. So in here, the main character's uncle, he's just pure narcissistic and evil and terrifying. Smokey, another character you'll meet in the book, is pretty much a douche, and I would have hit him in real life. He was awful, manipulative, and terrifying. But the one that creeped me out the most was the real life Joseph Seed, and that was Sonny Gardner. Sonny Gardner, when you meet him, is creepy, terrifying, manipulative, terrifying, all in. Sorry, dropping my mic there. All in one package. It's like Joseph Seed brought to life. I hated him, he freaked me out, but he also had me hooked. And they were memorable characters. I remember the horror and the fantasy stuff, but what stands to me is the stuff that got in Jack's way in the human world, not the territories. And I love that. I love that human-esque. And there's some very memorable characters because of that. And I think that's why I would recommend the book. The very human nature, well, the most darkest point of human nature is at front. And it is a very great story-driven and hook for this book. I'm trying to see what else I've wrote. I've wrote lots of notes. See, this is a thing where I wrote my pros and cons, and I keep hitting my mic. This is not professional. But when I stopped the book, I wrote, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different notes because it was a really immersive storyline. And I think the biggest note I have to do is when you have collaboration artists, so King and Strub, you always worry that there's going to be a clash of ideas, essentially. Is one going to overrule the other? But you can't get that in the book. It seems like it was written by one author, and that's how seamless it was. I believe a lot of the human nature and the darkness about humans was from Strub, and a lot of the supernatural stuff from King, and it did blend perfectly well, and I kind of enjoyed it. I actually do want to reread it, but I'm not too sure when because 900 pages is long. Now there is also a sequel that these two did, and I'm very excited to read that if I can ever find it. But overall, if you're looking for your next supernatural horror or, well, human horror with a little bit of fantasy and parallel dimension twist, I would actually give this book a go. It's pretty well done, and the story is dark, gripping, and when you get to the end, you actually feel like you've been on the journey with Jack. That's how I put it. You feel like you step on the journey with him and you end on it, and there's no over exaggeration ending, no 5 years later, 10 years later. It just ends. As if Jack's journey has ended and your journey with Jack has also ended. And I like that. I like there's no over exaggeration, no epilogue that's another book in itself. There is an epilogue that's about 4 sentences. When you read it, it'll make sense. But I won't spoil the epilogue because it's unfair. So, a little bit of PSA. Is it PSA? Public service announcement. I am completely dropping Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring as a review. It was the Nerdy Archer and some other people in Discord that actually highlight the fact that these books were originally one huge book split into 3. So, to be respectful to the author, I'm going to actually review Lord of the Rings as a book. So, 1 to 3 in one single review. So that might be a bit longer, but I don't want to do 3 episodes on the Fellowship, the Return, and then the third one, which is completely gone. So I'll do it all in one. Currently reading, I've lost it. I thought it was in here, but it's gone. The Maze Runner, so thank you everyone for suggesting that. After I read The Maze Runner, I'm going to aim to read Bram Stoker's Dracula and release it on Monday, the 31st of October for Halloween. Perfect Halloween book reviews, vampires. So perfect. I was going to do Salem's Lot, but I'm not touching that book again. That book, I think I read it. I read because I've got like the extended edition, which has two of the short stories. I read the short story, I closed the book, and I was very tempted to buy an armful of garlic and crucifixes because I didn't want to sleep at night. He was very faithful to vampire lore, and yeah, thanks Stephen King for making me afraid of vampires. I have seen a lot of vampire stuff in my life. I've seen the BBC Dracula, I've seen, I think it's From Dawn to Dusk, and a few others. Yeah, vampires are vampires. Read Stephen King's Salem's Lot, however, yeah, you don't want to be near vampires ever again. So, will Bram Stoker's Dracula really terrify me of vampires again? Or, to quote the Sisterhood server, will it just give me more sexy vampire vibes? I will not elaborate on sexy vampire vibes till I've read the book because I still can't get over the term sexy vampire vibes. How a book has sexy vampire vibes is, even just saying it is weird. So once all that's done, we will do a new Twitter poll between the Chronicles of Narnia because I've never read them, and I have all 7 books in one anthology. So I could either read that and do one review, or I could do the Maze Runner Scorch Trial, which is the second book because I've got the Maze Runner Scorch Trial, Death Cure, I think the third one is, and then the prequel. But I've heard you can't read the prequel till you've read all 3. I don't understand that because the prequel's a prequel, so we'll see. Apologise for the shifting. I have stolen my son's table, so I'm 6, well, 5'11", so nearly 6 foot. My kids are about 3 foot, so I am on a kid's 3 foot chair. It's perfect for the mic and my setup for cake, drink, and show, but I'm on a 3 foot chair and my legs are killing. So if I'm very moving in these episodes, it's not just that I'm very excited about books because I do have 26 books to read and I'm always collecting. But yeah, I'm on a 3 foot chair, so. So thank you again for everyone for tuning in, and I'm excited for the next book, which is The Maze Runner, which at the moment I am actually fully enjoying. It's quick paced, which I love. I love quick paced books. I'm hooked, and there's not a lot of preemptive world building. The world building comes with the character, so you follow the character's journey, and I really love how the world's built with the character, not before. So it's not like this is the world X, Y, and Z. Main character wakes up and this is the world. Okay, so I know everything. It's like character wakes up, this is the world. You will experience it with your character. So I love books that do that, and we'll have to see. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and see you next week on Let's Talk Books.